appreciate it. So we're going to get started because we have a pretty tight agenda, and I also want to really honor the planning time at the end. So I want to make sure that we have the ample time that we saved for that. So today's PD, as you guys know, this is happening in a few rooms across campus. This is something that the instructional leadership team talked about and thought through and organized. And the focus today is on two aspects of academic discussion. The first one is around quality discussion prompts. So what are the questions we're posing to our students that are actually prompting critical thinking in the classroom? And the second one is about student talk. What are some basic strategies we can and should be employing regularly throughout a lesson plan to get more students talking and thinking about the material in class? So neither of these are things that we're assuming teachers don't know. It's more like a review and a practice and an opportunity to think about, what am I already doing well? How can I be doing more of this? How could I be doing it in a different way? Okay, so it's just an opportunity for reflection. So to get us going, the handout I gave you has space for you to kind of like think through the steps that we're going to ask you to think through at different points today. So at the top here you have space for this do now, or warm up, or catalyst, whatever you call it. So choose any class period, the first class period that comes to mind from this school year. Write down the names of the students from this class period that regularly contribute to class discussion, and then describe a few qualities or characteristics that these students exhibit. So just for reference, class discussion can be anything from sharing out the homework answers to Socratic seminar, we're having like a full-on discussion about the state of the world. Okay, so it can be anything. Anytime you're asking students to share out whole class, please do that.
Teachers, reminder for those who have not made their way to PD, please make sure you make your way to PD this afternoon. It has begun.
Okay, take 10 more seconds to just get down any thoughts you have about the students in your class who regularly contribute and the qualities they exhibit.
Is there a sign-in sheet?
So they like the attention to participate. My students, they like to pay attention.
Hey Dave, do you have just like a random scratch paper that we could send around as a sign-in sheet? Okay, however far you got in your thinking, even if you didn't have a chance to jot everything down, whatever you didn't get to write down, you can share out as the thoughts come to you. Please find a person next to you. The person with the longer hair is going to go first. If it's a tiebreaker, just do rock, paper, scissors and see who gets it. You guys are going to take 30 seconds each sharing. So the person with the longer hair, share the number of students you wrote down, the qualities and characteristics. 30 seconds, switch. If you're a trio, that's fine too.
My toughest class. I had three that really popped out. And one of them is IEP. And some of the qualities I thought about. One student who's really on topic, and she knows the content vocabulary. Another one pulling up previous knowledge and observations from his past experiences, trying to tie them together. And then just the idea of willing to take a chance and maybe ask a question or say what they wonder, or to work it out, like they're processing them.
So those are three qualities that are exhibited by three different students. I kind of generalized about the kids that I picked. And I only got through half of the class because I was thinking of first period. But they're all really confident. They all tend to communicate using a sense of part. Like they want to be part of the show or whatever. So they would add funny jokes and stuff. They're all smart. They're all thoughtful. That's all I have.
That's awesome.
10 seconds for these
I can't even
conversations.
remember some of my first period classes the other day.
I kind of, my head just like
Blanks.
locked up for a second. I was like, who's even in my third period? Who's in my third period?
Okay, please bring it back.
I think it's a
Thank you. All right, so let's just do volunteers. The number of students you wrote down, the qualities and characteristics they exhibit. Let's start with those two. Actually, no, I changed it up. Stand up if you had at least 10 students that came to mind for that class period. Okay, thank you. Take a seat. Stand up if you had at least 8 students that came to mind.
Well, I say all mine do. I call on them. I make sure
Okay?
100%.
Okay, so thank you for that clarity. I should have been more clear. I mean, without cold calling, natural, on their own, raising their hands. Stand up if you have at least 5 students on your list, 5 or more students on your list. Okay? 3 or more students on your list. Okay, fewer than 3. Okay. All right, so what were some of the qualities that these students have who just naturally on their own tend to raise their hands and contribute to class discussion? What were some of the qualities? Yeah.
I think they're confident, self-confident, they don't mind being wrong. And they're also inquisitive naturally. They're always asking questions or always wondering stuff.
Thank you. Anyone from other groups? Characteristics, qualities? Yeah.
They have a strong verbal strength.
Good. So they feel comfortable communicating verbally? Yep. Any other qualities or characteristics?
The ability to talk through their thought process, and so tapping in from their prior knowledge or previous knowledge and connecting it to the current topic.
So make connections, willingness to talk out loud, right? We talk about think aloud as teachers.
Usually, not always the most organized, but they usually have something to work with in front of them, so they always have an answer accessible, right? So organizer, they have the materials in front of them.
Good. Okay. And yeah.
They're always engaged. Like if we're reading an article and something catches their attention, right away they'll want to talk about it or say what they think about it.
Good, so engaged, and then that idea of being inquisitive, right? So the fact that they're inquisitive kind of keeps them engaged, they like learning, okay? Any realizations that come out for you from this exercise? Thinking about just a single class period and the number of students who participate and why? Turn to the people next to you, share with them any thoughts that come out of you from just doing this simple reflection.
Like a skills class, and when I'm pushing, the students are mainstream, and it's kind of the same in those classes too. They're the kids that are participating in that setting as well. So, organization and confidence.
Yeah, exact same situation. Especially if I have 4 or 5 of them, I've literally seen where it's each one of them is raising their hand.
Yeah. I don't see a difference with students that are more confident or participate more in study skills versus
Please wrap up.
And even the students that have some of their skills are really low, but they still will, they want to participate, they want to be
In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Can I just have 3 realizations, 3 volunteers to share out what came out of those conversations?
I'll share one.
Thank you.
I find quite often, especially in my AP classes, the one who speaks the most, or one who speaks the most, usually don't have the best answers in the class. Think more than they know.
Okay. I'll take 2 more. Yes, Jensen.
I realized that the students that want to speak are usually the ones that get off topic the most.
Okay. Anything else? One more.
Well, I was going to say, that they feel pretty safe in their environment to speak in front of the other students like that.
Good. Thank you. So hopefully what we walk away from here today is either having some reminders about the value of student talk, but also the structures that can make for productive, constructive student discussion, right? Or some new strategies. So what we did just now is obviously like some of your most basic turn and talk or think, pair, share, right? Turn to the person next to you, talk it out, and then you call in volunteers to share out what came out of your conversation with the whole class, right? Most basic. Even with that, I want us to just think about how does doing this multiple times throughout a class period improve student engagement and student learning? How does giving them those opportunities improve student engagement and student learning? And as you share with the person next to you, I want you to try a slightly different version of turn and talk. So if I'm Brandon and Amy, the youngest person's going to go first. She's going to so the first person will share what they think about this question. The person's listening, and then before you switch, the listener needs to paraphrase back to that person what they heard them say. Okay? So share, listen, paraphrase, switch. Share, listen, paraphrase. Okay? The question is, how does student talk, how does turn and talk improve student learning and engagement?
Share.
I think it builds their confidence, allows them to interact with other students, so that a student that is maybe weak verbally can observe a student that's, has high verbal strengths, and they're able to maybe model or have some growth in that area.
So paraphrasing, practice makes perfect.
Right.
I like the idea of having students practice talking about themselves, and it helps them in job interviews, which is one of the areas of the curriculum for career technical education students. They have to answer questions in interviews. They need to be able to talk to college advisors about the subject areas that they're interested in pursuing. And at the high school level, many times, that's where they first have the opportunity to think about career opportunities. And with reference to readiness for the job market, there's lots of opportunities for high school students to have summer employment, and helping them to engage with another student to practice these conversations about their skills and what they're able to contribute to the work environment is a really important skill to build.
So what you're saying is the students are starting at the high school level with building job interviewing skills
Okay, about 40
through
seconds.
the college career technical field.
College and
allows
career
them
readiness.
readiness, and that allows them to develop those skills early on before they go out into the workforce.
Yes.
Okay.
Repetition helps students learn.
I think it helps for them to learn how to voice their opinions.
Okay, wrap up those conversations, please. All right. So just in general, the question was, why use this practice? Why ask a question and before students share out with everybody, have them share with each other, right? That's question number one. So why? Why have students turn and talk with each other before sharing whole class? What's one reason, Dave?
They're more willing to stumble through a concept with one person than stumble through a lot.
And why build in that paraphrase piece? Why have one partner paraphrase with the other, what they heard from the other?
Active listening instead of just passively sitting there going through the process. They're actually gaining something from what the other person said. They have to show that they listened.
Yep.
I would say even more so than listening, you have to fully understand what they're saying if you're going to try to paraphrase it back to them.
Yeah, you have to be able to understand what they're saying, or if you didn't understand what they're saying, you're being forced to recognize that, right? And work your way through it and maybe ask a clarifying question, right? Rather than just nodding. And another thing to do with this is, for this partner, I could have Radis share out Lauren's response and Lauren share out Michael's response, right, with the whole class. So then they paraphrase it to each other, and then they had to share out their partner's answers, right? Okay, so quickly, learning targets for the day. Can we popcorn read these? Anyone jump in? Read number one. Teachers will be able to
identify and explain the key elements of an effective discussion prompt.
Explain the value of student talk in the classroom and feel prepared to have students turn and talk or think, pair, share before individuals share out ideas or answers with the whole class.
Design or revise a lesson plan to include effective discussion prompts and multiple opportunities for turn and talk and or think, pair, share.
Okay, please quickly turn to the person next to you. Tell them which of these three you want to focus on most for your own practice today. Which of these three is most relevant to you today? Take a sec and then turn and share with the person next to you.
Probably number one for me, just because that is like the stem of all of them, kind of. Having that effective prompt in the first place will allow students to effectively talk about it in class. If it's something that doesn't really make sense, they're not going to be invested.
Otherwise they stop wrong direction. For
I
example,
think for me it's number three, but I'm also very interested in scaffolding it for some of our students who can support the gen ed teachers and like providing, because sometimes I see when, like with my students, if I say, okay, pair up and talk to each other, they go like this. They like, you know, and they need like a break. Yeah, like
starting with like
lessons
smaller,
in
like
smaller sections,
or just like
chunking it a bit more.
or getting them used to that practice by like the first question is something super simple like what's your favorite breakfast cereal or something to get them comfortable with sharing, and then is that what you mean? Like
or kind of like just breaking it down a bit more. So if the whole class is participating, then like step A, so they have a little bit more of a broken down. How do they? So right now you respond to this, or you know, like just a little bit more guidance for them and how to have those social interactions.
Okay. So in a case like this, the whole idea is, right, if we have three things we want folks to walk away with, and we realize that there are different strengths and areas for growth in the room, it's kind of nice for students too to have an opportunity to think about where they are with the learning target at the beginning and what they want to work on. I could just have you guys have that own processing moment for yourselves, and we don't have to do a share out. Or I could have you stand up if you focused on number one, stand up if you focused on number two, stand up if you focused on number three, so we could see who was in the room, right? So different ways, just depending on what your goals are. Okay, here's our agenda. We're already a little bit behind, so we're gonna speed up a little bit. But we've started doing some practice with Turn and Talk and Think, Pair, Share. We're gonna look at some best practices. The quality of the questions we pose to students, we're gonna look at those. We're gonna take a minute and just think back through all the times and ways in which we partnered up today and all the strategies we practiced. And then we'll have some planning time and some share out on that work, and then a very quick exit ticket. Okay? All right, so in your packets, you have this. On the back, very back. Nope. Second to back. Third page. Thank you. Second to back would be the third page. Thank you. Okay, so I'm sure that we could add to this list, but for the purposes of today, we just wanted to focus on a few key best practices that we could take and apply in our classrooms tomorrow if we weren't already using them today. So, clear and specific instructions. Can someone read the example under clear and specific instructions, please? Thank you.
Turn to the person sitting next to you. Share your answer to the do now question and how you arrived at it. The person with longer hair talks for the first minute. Then you switch.
Okay. And then the non-example?
Talk to someone near you and share what you wrote down.
Okay. So the difference indicating who goes first, the amount of time, which is the next one. Specifically, right, tell them your answer to number 1 of the do now, right? Like being really specific. Time segments, that one's pretty clear. Give them the amount of time and tell them when they have 10 seconds left or 20 seconds left and when they should be switching. Teacher circulates purposely. Someone want to read the example?
Teacher walks around the room, listens to student discussions, and asks 3 students ahead of time if she or he can call on them during the whole class discussion.
Okay, so if I'm walking around the room and I hear a student who doesn't normally contribute saying something insightful to his partner, I might just say, that was really great, can I call on you to share that with the whole class, right? And then I have 3 volunteers right there, plus anyone else who naturally wants to piggyback off of that. As opposed to just standing at the front of the room or at your desk. If you don't know what they're talking about, you're less prepared to facilitate that whole class share out, right? Use before every whole class discussion. Can someone read the example, please?
Turn and talk to your neighbor about the prompt. Be ready to share with the class.
Okay, so just the idea that almost every time before you have students raise their hand or you cold call or anything, if you give them the chance to talk it out first, like we said, then you're gonna have more volunteers, you're gonna have more hands go up in the room. And if you do cold call, you're gonna have fewer kids say, I don't know, right? And then the last one is quality discussion prompts. So asking questions that have more than one answer, or if you ask a question that has only one answer, asking a follow-up question that prompts more critical thinking, right? So instead of which character gave Juliet the potion, it's who is most to blame for Romeo's and Juliet's deaths and why. Instead of what is the answer to number 47, it's what steps did you take to arrive at your answer to number 47 and why. So even if you want that answer, prompting with that follow-up is good practice. So again, do your own self-assessment. Take a minute. Think about which of these practices you already feel pretty strong with and which one you want to grow with. And then when you're ready, turn to the person next to you and share that with them.
I think I used, are we talking about?
Yeah.
I used peer review every day when I taught 7th and 8th grade, no fun. but I think I think everything else was pretty good, but I didn't put my clear and specific instructions weren't always the best.
Okay. Do you feel like that had any effect on the discussion?
Yeah. I think if I was a little bit more clear and specific about what to do, like I would never say turn to the person with the shortest hair. I would just say the person closest to you.
Yeah, so you...
Although they were in pairs, I used to see them in middle school in pairs. I never did groups of 4 because it was too much to manage for middle schoolers and one day. I guess it was obvious who to turn to, but I feel like if I was a little bit more clear,
it would have saved some time, maybe, like for them deciding who would talk
there's
first.
certain things I could have said. There's a little bit. It's more. I would do more. Talk to the person next to you about what you wrote down. You have 1 minute to do so.
Right.
And then I found it was really hard to go through. And I would have classrooms with 35 kids too, so it was really hard to go through and actually hold them to talking and have them not talk about candy bars or their favorite song instead of, or who was cute. Or
How do you guide them away from that sort of
well,
discussion?
I think the kids here would be more likely to actually talk about what was said than where I was before, and their age, I think makes a big difference. I think it's harder to hold 7th graders to it than high school students, so I think it would be easier, and I have smaller class sizes here, so I think it would be easier to then circulate to hold them to talk about it.
So you put a time period on now?
I think that's really important to have a time period, or have a timer. So,
Some of the teachers do have a timer.
what?
Some of the teachers do have a timer.
Yeah.
Of bringing classes.
I've had them in the past, but they're always broken. Because I buy the kitchen egg timers. I think you need like a digital one. I gotta figure out where to get one of those. So.
I think the other piece with this, when they share the answer, having that discussion about how their evidence, their basis for their answer.
Yeah.
You're saying like show me the steps as opposed to show me the answer?
Yeah. Evidence or reason.
For that, that's essential.
Not just your answer.
Yes, you have to have that process.
4, 3, 2, 1. Awesome. It's also okay to close out those conversations before all kids have finished, because I'd rather have kids like chomping at the bit, upset that they didn't get to share, than no kids sharing, right? So I'm gonna let that be a table conversation. I feel like I walked around the room, I got a sense that everyone really was doing that thoughtful reflection. We don't have to share it out with everybody. We don't all have to know everybody's business all the time. So in this document, if you guys flip back to the first page, this is a checklist. Sorry, we're doing a lot today, but hopefully the pace feels okay. This is a checklist. If you guys go on OUSD's website, there's like this whole hidden sub-website with all of these materials on academic discussion, and a lot of them are actually really good. And this checklist is from there, and maybe in a follow-up email to the staff, I'll send out the link to this website. But this is a checklist, again, another list that we could probably add criteria to, but this is to get us started. So when we think about the questions we prompt our students to think about in class, or write about, or talk about, these are things we want to keep in mind. Can we, one person from every group, take a bullet point, please. Read it aloud.
Does the prompt leave room for multiple perspectives or solutions?
Is the prompt open-ended?
Does the prompt connect to a big idea or essential question of the lesson unit?
Is the prompt engaging to students? Is it worthy of discussion?
Bounce back to this.
Does the prompt require students to think critically?
Is the prompt posted?
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to practice with these. With this question, who or what is most to blame for students being tardy to their 5th period class? So, let's just go through this list. Turn to your table. Does this prompt leave room for multiple perspectives or solutions? Turn and talk. Take 15 seconds. Go.
Yes.
the student is.
I think it does leave room. It's open-ended.
Right.
So it leaves room for different, multiple perspectives.
Okay, give me a thumbs up to the side or down. Thumbs up is it does leave room for multiple perspectives. Thumbs down is it doesn't. Middle is I don't know. Okay, I agree. I think that we could each have different answers, and I'm sure we all do. Is this prompt open-ended? Give me a thumbs up, middle, side, or down. Is this prompt open-ended? Give me your thumb, dude. Give me your thumb. Okay, so for folks in the room who have sideways or down, raise your hand and tell me why it's not open-ended.
You could just say teachers. It says who or what is to blame for students being targeted in class.
Oh, specifically.
It's like the bells. Teachers and the bells.
Okay,
You
so
can give
Like
one word
that's-
answer, there's no need to like elaborate or
You have to be like the bells because the bells are always inaccurate. Sometimes they rang at the wrong time.
But
There's
are
no
we,
why or explanation of that.
are we saying for our
There's
particular
no
school?
why,
Because
right?
that's after lunch. So here it would be like, because they're having lunch.
Okay, so I'm gonna write this up here.
I mean, if that were to be the most, like where students are most tardy to their 5th period, I would say that would be my estimation of that.
So not enough context. Anything else?
Not motivated.
Well, so the question right now is why is this prompt not so open-ended?
Oh, not so good. I think it's open.
I would add that it implies that there's one answer. So who or what is most to blame? It implies that you're gonna arrive at one answer, right? Okay, let's just assume it connects to the essential question of the lesson or unit. Is this prompt engaging to students? Is it worthy of discussion? Thumbs up, side, down. Okay, why sideways?
Why sideways?
Yeah, so
Well, it depends on the students and what they're looking at. If they're trying to, like, if in leadership and trying to solve a problem. But if you got kids who really could care less or not, you know, or there's a group of kids who are trying to solve their problem and why they're tardy, and you're with Mr. Pearson's class, you know, trying for restorative justice, I mean, it might help. But just your regular class is like, I'm not late, why do I need to talk about it?
So, or the ones that are late all the time, they don't wanna blame themselves, so they don't really wanna talk about it, they don't really care.
You're not necessarily gonna get authentic answers.
okay.
Can I interject for 1 sec?
Uh-huh.
I had fish bowls about tardiness yesterday, and you can sustain a full period of 80 seniors, three different classes with varying levels. They will all talk about tardiness for an entire class and come up with all sorts of different ideas and theories about it.
Interesting.
So no problem.
Okay.
They have so much perspective on it. It's not even funny.
Okay. Okay, but I do like what Brandon said, like, is this related to a problem they're trying to solve, right? Like, where's the context? What's the context for this question? Okay, does it require students to think critically? Would they have to really have evidence to back it up? Would they have to think about different scenarios? Does it prompt critical thinking? Getting heads shaken? Is it posted? Yes. Okay, so how could we rewrite this question so that it met these three additional pieces? Turn to your table to top.
So since you guys have talked about it so much, what are the kind of things they brought up?
It depended on the class, but they really talked about the bathroom a lot and how that's not being acknowledged, and the lines in the bathroom during the passing periods. They talked about, some of them, they did acknowledge that certain students were there's certain students that evade, but that most students are actually trying to get in class, and there's a lot to do, and they feel like that there's a disconnect. And the students who don't go to class cloud the reality that you do have to go
There are
to the
legitimate
bathroom.
reasons to
You do. Sometimes it's really far. There's gym teachers that don't release them on time.
Yes.
There's all sorts of different
Because they have
factors.
to get changed.
Exactly. Art classes, they don't always clean up on time. So sometimes if the teacher doesn't wind down the art class, then it winds up going for.
So basically, the students' needs are not being heard in this. Like, there's no student voices. Like, if they're tardy, they're being bad. As opposed to, they're human, they have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
You know, like, sometimes teachers are late to class
Yeah.
because they have to go to the bathroom.
Exactly.
But the students aren't allowed to have that.
Yeah, so there's that piece of their voice isn't being heard, and there isn't acknowledged that they are biological organisms with necessary need to eliminate waste. And then there's also the fact that some students are actually just trying to be taught on purpose. And then there's the whole avoidance issue, where students, we're talking about how they'll avoid a class, or it's tough to motivate them to get there on time if they know it's not going good right now. So it's like a coping mechanism that creates a bigger problem, but they acknowledge they do it sometimes. And then the whole setup of the campus is hard. They said there's not enough security guards. They said the security guards don't always engage them and tell them to go to class, or aren't always out. They felt like there aren't enough staff out during passing periods. So there was a ton of different things that they thought, and they were less likely to blame themselves and look at their own role in it, though.
So were these kids who were tardy, or were these kids who were like, you know what I mean?
It was a mix. So some of them are tardy a lot, some of them aren't. Some of them were leadership kids.
Yeah, I'd be interested to.
3, 2, 1. Okay, can you guys share what you said, please? Sorry, Lauren and Reyes.
For the idea to help with the open-ended, as well as thinking critically, and idea for one thing we brought was that, if you were a specific person, say like if you were admin and you're seeing an issue with the tardiness, what could be some of the problems? Why is it happening? And then offering something where they can move forward and build upon the information that they're gathering or the ideas that they're gathering to go forward with it. So for example, what are some options on how to resolve it?
Okay, so adding kind of like 2 follow-up questions. How do you know, and what steps should we take? Or should admin take? Yeah.
We talked about just turning it completely upside down and how can we improve the tardy problem at fifth period. And that way, instead of saying what's to blame, they will come across all the reasons and work towards solving it instead of trying to, they'll come to that, I guess, organically is the word you'd use. The problems and so forth as they're trying to improve school culture and so forth. And that would make it more critically because the kids would engage, and it also, what's the other end, is very open-ended because you're looking for solutions instead of identifying.
And in order to identify solutions, you have to look at the causes first.
Right.
Yep.
And we looked at it like a self-exploration question, and we piggybacked on that with looking at various steps to solving, what are the steps that we can take to go through the problem, as well as, a how type question.
And even saying like, what are the first 2 steps admin should take, right? Then they would have to go through all the ideas and identify the first 2 most important, right? You want to add one more?
No, it's pretty much that.
Okay. Okay. So how about so there are 3 practice prompts on here. One's a little more like science mathy, one's a little more arts, ELA, history, and one is I wrote it as like a PE relevant question. I don't want to take the time to go through these because I feel like we just did a good practice around there. But these are 3 opportunities for you to kind of continue thinking through how the ways in which these match the checklist and how you might rewrite them so that they would prompt more critical thought. So you can do that on your own time and all your free spare time that I know teachers have. Okay, so before we shift into individual planning time, we're going to have a little contest. You guys ready? Are you ready? I don't think you're ready. I don't hear it. Turn to the person next to you. Tell them you're ready. No, just kidding. Okay. I want you to independently, this is the think part, independently, make a list of all the times today that you remember sharing with a partner before anyone shared with the entire group. And then for each of those times, all the different versions of turn and talk or think, pair, share we used. Okay? Make that list on your own. Take 2 minutes to make that list on your own. Yes, this is also in your handout on the back, page 2. Your partners, combine it, come up with the best, most comprehensive list.
Did you have 4? 4 different things?
I had the do now where we talked about talkative students, participating students. We had the one when we would use student talk. And what did you have? There was 2 that
I have paraphrase, and then we paraphrase. Is that what you're talking about? Think, pair, share. And then she also had us pick which objective of the 4 we would want to know more about. The 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. And then we revised the prompt. That one. So I got 4.
Me, I will change a little bit because I will usually try to pair them. You're number 1, you're number 2. I will give you a more specific role to play. For example, in the definition of demand, you see, you are the price, you are the quantity, and somebody is the time. Time can change the demand. And I try to assign them a different task, more specific, other than just give you a price.
Right.
Your price, your quantity, your reaction to the price. You are the time, you are the quantity, reacting to it. So I do a little bit different. Because it depends on the subject. I think sometimes it's not one medicine fits all. It depends on the subject. Which subject it is, maybe you have to modify a little bit.
There's that one too. Did you mention that one?
Which one?
Where we talked about which one of these.
Oh, I think we missed that one. So there were 5.
Okay, let's take 30 more seconds in our small groups. Or none? Okay. Who remembers turning to a partner at least once today? Twice. 3 times. 4 times. 5 times. 6 times. Did we do more than that? Oh, the answer's 6. Yeah. Go with 6. Okay, so here's what I learned. I had all of these times planned out in the original lesson, but as always, I'm not very good at timing my lessons, so we skipped some stuff. So 6 was good for us today, I think. But in the planning, I thought through all of these different times where folks could share with each other before with everybody. Okay? And it was actually really helpful because this is something this is something that, like, I personally last year was reflecting on in my own teaching, how many opportunities I lost where I didn't have students turn and talk with each other before sharing out with the whole class. And one way to kind of help yourself think through it is as you write your agenda for the lesson plan, building in little notes to yourself about when students can share with each other before the whole class. Just like a simple notation, turn and talk. This is the paraphrase, think, turn, talk, paraphrase, right? However that makes sense to you, building that into your agenda and your BBC, and even putting it on the board for students to see, like, why not? Why not be as transparent as possible with students about what you're having them do for the 51 minutes that they're with you, right?
I really have fear of the turn and talk.
Okay.
Because students, you know, it may be important to you, but they just saw something crazy, you know, on their way to class. And that's more important, and they're going to just waiting at the opportunity, the excuse to talk, and then they're off subject. And so, myself personally, I always have people have to write down their thoughts before they speak.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps control it because it takes time where they're already kind of engaged. And I can see what they're talking about as I've seen their writings. So, and also all our kids need to write more than they do anyhow, you know, for those that are English backgrounds.
So when you think about how you teach students to turn and talk, like, raise your hand if you've had students turn and talk and they talked about anything but what you wanted them to talk about. Right? So what are other strategies that maybe have to go into this before you just start telling students to turn to their neighbor and talk every 5 seconds? So there's the think, pair, share. Like, the thinking first is the slight difference between turn and talk and think, pair, share, right? So think it out, write it down. But what else? Like, how else can we teach students how to do this?
Right there,
What else? What do students need to be able to learn anything? What do any of us need to be able to learn anything? Yep. Can you model it on your own? One teacher, talk to yourself? Mm-hmm. Good. Or
Two students probably.
how do you hold students accountable for talking about what they're supposed to be talking about around the room? How do you keep them on task? Walk around. So walk around, on task points, right? How many of you have stopped, checked in with a pair of students, they talk about what you want them to talk about, you leave, you know they're not talking about it anymore?
For students with disabilities that possibly have auditory processing disorder, you would have to probably give that student a keyword and have them hang on to that keyword to kind of carry them through the conversation.
Mm-hmm. I would also, in addition to, like, giving points for, because you know when that pair or that group has stopped talking about what they're talking about. You don't have to be standing next to them to know that those students are off task. You know what I mean? So I would also be totally, if you have some sort of a point system or a reward system, I would offer whole class points, right? Just tell them, I'm the teacher, I know everything, I know when you're on task, I know when you're off task. And if the entire class is on task, the entire class gets points. If the entire class is off task, or if anyone's off task, we're not all gonna get those points. You know, that whole kind of class accountability. Other thoughts on this?
Can I get clarification on that?
Mm-hmm.
When you, are these like extra credit points, or you put like there was 5 points today for this and you guys weren't on, so everyone, you had 5 kids who weren't on, so the whole class is now 0 out of 5 points, or how is that?
I think it's however your system is set up.
Oh, but you're saying you've done that in the past, how do you set it up?
I had professionalism points that went into my students' professionalism part of their grade. So they would earn points individually for participating, they would earn points for asking questions, they earn points for helping each other. They would lose points for talking when they shouldn't talk. And then I would do whole class points and whole class losses when I felt like too many were off task or so many were on task, I wanted to give them all the reward. But so for me, I had no ethical problem with saying you guys can earn 1 million points today, because it was more of a classroom management technique than anything. But people just depends on what your system is.
Yeah, you don't have to actually count the points. You can tell them, like, you're earning points for this, and you might be writing, notes to yourself on your clipboard. They don't know. Yeah,
You don't, in AP, you don't get those anal kids who are looking at Mr. Johnson, you said.
Yeah, that's right. I had posters on the wall, like,
AP's
professionals and points on the wall. You're right. Yeah.
I mean, raise your hand if you have some sort of a points or point system. So during this work time, if anyone wanted to talk out, I mean, we could continue this conversation right now, but I also want to honor your own kind of like reflective time with what we've gone over. But put your hand up again in the air if you have a point system, some sort of a accountability system like that. So during this time, if anyone wants to pick anyone's brain about it or later, there's your resource.
I got one more up there.
Yeah.
A visual timer, like something that is on your projector, rather than you just have, that they can see it. It gives it a lot more in their mind otherwise.
Are there websites that do that, or?
Yeah, just look up like the timer online.
Okay.
It's like stopclock.com.
Okay.
I don't know if this goes with discussion or if it's something that would be different, but like I was bringing up that, like in my classroom, there's students with autism, and so it's really hard to do abstract. You have to do a lot of concrete. So, maybe having a checklist of what the kids have to check off when they're doing their discussion, if there's like a checklist they get beforehand or something.
Yeah, absolutely. So it goes back to, forget who said it, but I think it was Brandon about having like the materials in front of you, or maybe that was Dave. Having the materials in front of you that help guide your discussion, right? And then, I mean, from here, there's like, once it becomes more of a norm, there are so many strategies out there for academic discussion, right? There's like sentence frame cards, and there's beyond stuff. Awesome. So with that, so we have 20 more minutes. You guys mind if I erase this? So this is the next 15 minutes are your time to just do some kind of quick but meaningful reflection on how this might look, how these two things might look in your classes. In tomorrow's lesson, in Friday's lesson, on Monday's lesson, like you guys all have a sense of what you're teaching tomorrow. So taking that time, you have this space on your worksheet to think through it. No, you don't. Yeah, you do. Sure you do. I don't know. This space. Or on your own piece of paper, or wherever. Thinking through, what am I teaching tomorrow? Or Friday or Monday or whatever, with an upcoming lesson. What are the questions I want my students, I'm going to be asking my students? Am I going to be asking them what the answer to number 12 was, right? If I'm asking them what the answer to number 12 is, how can I make a note to myself to build in that time for them to talk to each other about how they got that answer, right? How can I revise or add discussion prompts that are going to push their thinking? And what are all of the times throughout the lesson where I can give them the opportunity to talk it out before we talk it out as a whole class? And what does my agenda look like with those notations put in? How am I gonna visually on my board remind myself of what I thought to do in my planning? Because we all know that the day starts, the lesson starts, the kids come in, you've got 5 of them asking you different questions, and if this is new, we might forget to do it, right? So this is kind of like, how awesome would it be if we walked into classrooms tomorrow and saw agendas with turn and talk notation as reminders for us as teachers on the boards? Questions? Do you need to turn to the person next to you and tell them what you're about to do? Okay, that's another thing. You can always have them turn and talk and tell each other what they're expected to do. Instructions need to be reviewed too. Okay, this is your work time. Please go for it.